The wind howled across the barren landscape of the alien world, sending dust swirling in the air. It was a place of fire and steel where both sides had clashed for weeks, and the fighting showed no sign of stopping. The human forces, though, outnumbered, were determined to hold their ground. Standing at the front lines of this war was a human soldier named Alex. He had seen more battles than he cared to count, and his experience made him an invaluable part of his squad. But today, he faced something far different from the typical enemies he had fought before. On the other side of the battlefield stood the enemy forces, led by the young and powerful alien princess Lyra. She was not just a royal figurehead. She had trained in combat and had proven herself a skilled strategist. At just 19 years old, she had earned a reputation across the galaxy for her beauty, intelligence, and ruthless command. The alien army viewed her as a symbol of their superiority, and she carried herself with an air of arrogance that made her seem untouchable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows over the battlefield, Alex took his position. Scanning the enemy lines through his helmet's visor, the battle was about to begin. He had fought countless times, but today something felt different. There was an eerie calm before the storm. It was coming from the alien side. The princess, standing tall on the front lines with her armored troops, spotted Alex from a distance. Her lips curled into a smug smile as she watched the human soldier, clad in heavy armor, take his position. She had heard stories of humans and their resilience, but she couldn't help but find their efforts laughable. To her, they were little more than insects, scrambling to hold on to their fading relevance in a galaxy dominated by superior species. Like hers? With a voice that rang out over the battlefield, she shouted, "You humans think you can stop us? How pitiful." Her words carried across the distance, reaching Alex's ears despite the chaos of the battlefield. "I'd have more respect for you if you simply bowed before us. But instead, you fight like foolish children. Do you even know what you're up against?" Alex stiffened. Her words stung, but he didn't let them show. He had heard taunts before, especially from those who thought they were superior. But there was something in her voice, something mocking, that made him pause. He wasn't the type to rise to provocation, but there was a sense of arrogance in the way she spoke that irritated him. Taking a deep breath, Alex made a decision. Without hesitation, he reached up and began to unfasten the clasps of his helmet. The battlefield fell silent for a brief moment as his face came into view. It wasn't the action of a fool, but one of defiance. The human soldiers who stood nearby exchanged uncertain glances. They had never seen their commander act this way before. The alien princess's laughter rang out, piercing the air like a blade. "What's this? Are you giving up already, human? Or perhaps you think that without your armor, you'll somehow win my respect?" Alex didn't respond. He simply continued removing his armor, piece by piece, until he stood there in his simple combat suit. The cold wind bit at his skin, but he stood firm, meeting the princess's gaze with a quiet determination. He didn't need armor to fight. He didn't need weapons to prove his worth. His spirit was enough. The alien princess was momentarily taken aback by his boldness. She had expected fear, submission, or at the very least a sense of dread. But instead, she saw a soldier who stood before her without a trace of hesitation. It was a challenge that she had not anticipated. "A fool," she spat, her eyes narrowing. "You'll be dead before you can even make a move. Your arrogance will be your undoing." Alex didn't flinch. He wasn't here for a show of strength. He was here to fight. The rest of the battlefield seemed to fade into the background as the two locked eyes. The princess's anger flared, and she motioned for her troops to advance. But she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was different about this human. With a final glance, Alex turned and walked away. His steps were steady, each footfall echoing in the silent air. The alien princess watched, stunned and speechless, as he disappeared into the distance. The human soldiers who had been watching the exchange were left in awe. They had expected Alex to fight, to push back against the insults. But instead, he had done something unexpected. He had walked away. "Let him go," Alex's commanding officer, Captain Lyle, said, his voice calm. "He knows what he's doing." On the alien side, The princess stood frozen, her mind racing. How could a human soldier have the audacity to walk away from her? Like that she had mocked him, insulted him, and yet he had shown no fear. It was as though he had seen right through her, and in that moment, he had taken away the one thing she had always relied on, her sense of superiority. The princess's eyes narrowed as she turned to her forces. "Prepare for battle," she commanded. Her voice sharp and cold. "This human will regret his actions, but not today." Her troops, who had been waiting for her orders, moved into position. The princess's thoughts were clouded with uncertainty. The human soldier, Alex, had done something she hadn't expected. And that left her wondering, who were these humans really? What made them so different from the other species she had conquered? The battle raged on. But the princess could not shake the feeling that this day would change everything. This opening sets the stage for the conflict between the alien princess and the human soldier, filled with tension, pride, and a subtle shift in how each of them views the other. Alex's surprising choice to walk away from the mocking alien princess is just the beginning of a transformation that will challenge both of them in ways they never anticipated. The wind still howled across the battlefield as Alex walked away from the alien princess, his heart steady, but his mind racing. Every step he took felt like an echo, not of fear, but of something else, something deeper. He had faced countless battles, stood against overwhelming odds, and survived through sheer grit. But today was different. Today, his silence had spoken louder than any weapon. Behind him, the alien princess Lyra stood motionless. Her eyes locked on him with a mix of confusion and disbelief. Her pride had been shattered in a way she had never expected. No one had ever dared to dismiss her in such a manner, especially not a human. She had expected fear, defiance, maybe even anger, but not this calm indifference. It unsettled her more than she cared to admit. As Alex continued his retreat, his fellow human soldiers looked on in disbelief. They had expected a dramatic stand, a fight, anything but this. But as Alex moved further back from the battlefront, something began to change in the way they saw him. The idea of fighting in the traditional sense against overwhelming forces with armor and guns seemed insignificant, compared to the simple power of a human choosing to stand on his own terms. Captain Lyle, Alex's superior, stood to the side, watching him with a knowing look. He had seen Alex do things others would call foolish, but he knew that the young soldier's actions had a purpose. "Let him do what he must," Captain Lyle muttered under his breath. "It's not the weapons or armor that define a warrior, but the heart. And Alex, he has a heart." As Alex walked deeper into the human ranks, a quiet hush fell over his comrades. It wasn't fear they felt. It was something more akin to awe. The soldiers who had followed him into battle many times knew him to be a man of few words but steady courage. Now they began to see that courage in a new light. It wasn't the strength of his armor or the force of his weapons that made him a leader. It was his resolve, his choice to be the kind of soldier who acted on his convictions, regardless of the consequences. As the battle raged on behind him, the alien forces pushed forward, pressing on as if they hadn't even noticed Alex's departure. Lyra, standing high on the battlefield, tried to regain control of the situation. Her soldiers were already advancing with fierce determination. Still, her thoughts kept drifting back to that human soldier, walking away without a fight. It gnawed at her, pulling her focus from the battle. She knew she had to put the thought out of her mind. But it kept creeping back. For the first time in her life, she doubted her own actions. She had mocked him, underestimated him, and yet, instead of fighting back in anger, he had made a decision to simply walk away. It was not a display of weakness, but of a deep, unwavering confidence. It made no sense to her. Humans were supposed to be weak. They were supposed to fall apart under pressure, to crumble at the sight of a superior force. But Alex had done none of that. He had chosen his own path, one that didn't rely on the tools of war. The battle stretched on, but Alex's absence began to change the mood in the human ranks. A sense of unity began to form among them. The more they watched him walk away from the mockery, the more they realized something they had always known but never truly understood. They weren't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for something bigger. Alex had shown them that. It wasn't just about weapons or battles. It was about standing for something, no matter how small or outmatched you seemed. In the alien ranks, the situation was also shifting. Lyra's forces, who had advanced with confidence, began to falter. The energy from the humans was different. Now they weren't backing down. They were fighting with a new strength, something intangible. Even though they had fewer soldiers, their resolve was stronger than ever before. The princess felt the shift in the air as her soldiers grew hesitant, their morale wavering. "What is this?" Lyra muttered under her breath, watching as her troops paused, unsure of how to proceed. It wasn't just the humans' fighting spirit that was unsettling. It was their silence, their calm. She had expected them to retreat in fear, to bow before the overwhelming force of her army. But instead, they fought back with a focus that had eluded her understanding. For the first time, Lyra felt the weight of the situation press down on her. Her people had always been the ones in control, the ones who were feared across the galaxy. But Alex's simple act of walking away from her mockery was starting to turn the tide in ways she couldn't explain. Meanwhile, Alex stood with his comrades, preparing for the next move. He had made his point, but now he had to focus on the bigger picture. The battle was still ongoing, and the war was far from over. But as he looked at the faces of his fellow soldiers, something inside him stirred. He had shown them that they didn't need to rely on their armor or weapons to be strong. They were already strong, and that strength came from within. Captain Lyle approached him, his eyes full of respect. "You did something today, Alex," he said, his voice low but filled with admiration. "You've given them something they never had before. Hope. You've reminded us that we don't need to fight. The way they want us to, we fight our own way." Alex nodded, but he didn't respond with words. There was no need. Already spoken louder than anything he could say. Back on the battlefield, the alien princess, though outwardly composed, could feel the shift in the atmosphere. Her forces were not as unified as they had been before. They were unsure, distracted, uncertainty. Something began to crumble her confidence. Her belief that her species was invincible. For the first time in her life, Lyra felt doubt. Creeping in, could it be that the humans, the very species she had mocked, were stronger than she had ever imagined? As the battle continued, both sides fought fiercely, but the human soldiers, inspired by Alex's silent stand, held their ground. They no longer saw themselves as outmatched, and that made all the difference. And in the midst of this chaos, the alien princess began to question everything she had believed. Could the humans truly be capable of more than they had ever shown? The battle was far from over, but one thing was clear. The path ahead was no longer as certain as it once seemed. The war raged on, but Lyra, the 19-year-old alien princess, could not focus on the battlefield. She stood at the command center aboard her flagship, watching as her troops pushed forward. The sounds of battle echoed through the ship's walls, but none of it mattered to her at that moment. Her mind was consumed by one human soldier, Alex. Her advisors and generals continued to relay information about the progress of the fight. But Lyra was distant. She couldn't stop thinking about what had happened earlier. The human soldier, Alex, had done something no one in her galaxy had ever done before. He had simply walked away, without a word or a fight. It was an insult, but it was also something else. It was a message. "You should focus, Your Highness," one of her generals said, his voice thick with concern. "We're winning this battle. We don't have time for distractions." Lyra's sharp eyes turned to him, her gaze cold. "I am not distracted, General. I am thinking," she said, "about the human." The general hesitated, unsure of how to respond. The princess had always been a fierce leader, confident and decisive. But her words now revealed doubt, something she had never seen in herself. The general knew better than to argue, but still spoke, trying to refocus her. "The humans are weak. One soldier's actions won't change the outcome." Lyra didn't reply immediately. She had heard this many times, from her generals, from her advisors, from the other leaders of her people. They all saw humans as beneath them, and yet here she was, able to shake the feeling that there was something different about Alex. She stood by the large window overlooking the battlefield, watching as the humans held their ground. The alien forces were still making progress. But it wasn't as easy as it had been before. The human soldiers fought harder now, pushing back with more strength and determination than ever before. She had expected them to cower, to crumble under the weight of her forces. But instead, they seemed to grow more united. Lyra turned back toward her command table, where her most trusted advisors were waiting. They all looked to her for direction, but today she wasn't sure what to say. There is something about this. Human, she finally spoke, her voice quieter than usual. I've never seen anything like it. His decision to walk away? It was as if he knew something we don't. Her chief strategist, Commander Orcs, stepped forward, a concerned look on his face. Princess, with all due respect, this one human is not worth your focus. The war is bigger than him. We have far more pressing matters to deal with. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with both frustration and curiosity. You don't understand. He didn't fight back. He didn't try to prove himself. And yet, in doing nothing, he did something that shook me. He stood without armor, without pride, without fear. What if humans are stronger than we thought? Orcs looked unsure. You are overthinking, Princess. Humans are known for their fragility. The war will continue, and they will lose, as we have always known. But Lyra wasn't convinced. For the first time, she started to see humans differently. She had always believed her species was the strongest, the most advanced. But now, after seeing Alex's quiet confidence, she began to wonder, was it possible that the strength of her people wasn't enough to guarantee victory over a species like humans? What if they had more to them than she realized? Lyra left the command center and walked to her private quarters. She needed to be alone. The walls of her room, covered in the intricate designs of her alien culture, seemed cold and distant. She sat by the window, staring out at the chaos below. Her thoughts were a jumble of questions she had never considered before. Could she have underestimated the humans? Was there something about their spirit, their drive, that her people couldn't match? As she pondered this, she found herself thinking of Alex again. The way he had walked away without fear, without hesitation, kept replaying in her mind. She had insulted him, mocked him, and yet he had shown nothing but calm. It was as if he had nothing to prove to her, as if he didn't care about her power, her position, or her insults. In that moment, she realized that she might have been wrong about humans all along. The sound of her communicator broke her thoughts. A soft voice came through, the voice of her trusted aide, Nira. Princess, the human soldier Alex has requested to speak with you. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. Alex? Why would he want to speak with her now? After everything that had happened on the battlefield, why would he want to meet her? She hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to proceed. Send him in, she finally said, her voice steady but unsure. She wasn't ready for this. She wasn't ready to face him, to confront the doubts swirling in her mind. But it was too late to back out now. A few minutes later, Alex entered the room. He had his helmet off, just as he had on the battlefield, and he walked in without a hint of fear or nervousness. There was no arrogance in his steps, no superiority. He simply entered, as though this meeting was just another step in the course of his day. Lyra rose from her seat, unsure of what to say. She had never been in a situation like this before, where she felt both challenged and curious about another being. Alex stood silently, waiting for her to speak. I didn't expect this, Lyra said finally, her voice softer than usual. Why did you walk away from me? Why not fight? Alex looked at her, his expression calm, his eyes steady. Fighting wouldn't have proven anything, he said simply. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any weapon. Liza's heart skipped a beat. His words struck her like a physical blow. She had always believed in strength, in power, in showing who was superior. But this human, this soldier, was teaching her something she had never considered before. That true strength wasn't about overpowering others. It was about standing firm in what you believed, without needing to prove anything. She looked at him, truly seeing him for the first time. I misjudged you, she said quietly. I thought you were weak. Alex shook his head slightly, a small smile on his lips. I don't need to be strong in the way you think. My strength comes from my choices." In that moment, something changed in Lyra. She realized that Alex had shown her a different kind of power, one she had never even considered.
Oh.
It wasn't just physical strength, it was the strength of spirit, of conviction. And it was something that her people, despite all their advancements, might not have fully understood. The battle outside continued, but for the first time, Lyra wasn't focused on winning. She was focused on understanding. For the first time, she truly saw Alex not as an enemy, but as a force of nature, something more than she had ever imagined. The next few days on the battlefield passed in a blur of tension and uncertainty. Princess Lyra couldn't shake the conversation she had had with Alex. It replayed in her mind over and over. Like an uninvited thought she could not escape. She had always believed that strength was defined by the power of one's army, by the might of one's weapons, and by the fear one could instill in others. But Alex's quiet confidence had shattered that belief. She found herself torn between the pride of her people and the unexpected respect she felt for this human soldier. The war was still in full force, with no sign of peace in sight. Yet, the princess could no longer focus solely on her military strategy. Something had changed within her, a shift in how she saw humans, and even herself did. It was all because of one soldier, a man who had refused to fight the way she had expected. In her mind, Alex was no longer just a human to be defeated. He had become a symbol of something more. Meanwhile, Alex and his fellow soldiers continued to hold their ground. He wasn't concerned with how his actions had affected the princess or her army. For him, the fight was about survival, about the future of his people. But as the days wore on, he started to notice that the battle was not just taking place on the physical battlefield anymore. It was also taking place in their minds and in the heart of the princess. The next major battle began like any other. The humans prepared to defend their position, with their limited resources and their resolve to win at any cost. On the alien side, Princess Lyra had made her decision. She would not back down, but something in her had changed. She could no longer see the humans as just another enemy to be crushed. There was something more to them, something that she couldn't quite understand but knew she had to learn. To her surprise, the humans didn't show any signs of retreating. In fact, they were fighting with renewed strength, their actions led by the quiet defiance of their soldier, Alex. As Lyra observed the scene, she found herself caught in a whirlwind of emotions. The human forces, under Alex's quiet leadership, weren't simply surviving, they were thriving. Amidst the chaos of the battle, Lyra found herself pulled away from the front lines. Her advisors, seeing the shift in her attention, urged her to stay focused. But she was beyond their guidance now. She had to understand what Alex had done, what had made him so different from everyone else. Later that day, the princess ordered her ship to land near the human camp. It was an unexpected move, one that shocked her own officers. "Princess, you're not suggesting?" one of them asked, his voice filled with hesitation. Lyra cut him off, her eyes sharp. "I am suggesting it. I need to speak with him. Alone." Her command was firm, and though her officers were wary, they obeyed. The princess's shuttle descended quietly onto the alien landscape, far from the main battle. Lyra stepped off the ship, her boots sinking slightly into the dry soil. The landscape was vast, barren, and eerily quiet, a far cry from the noise and chaos of the battlefield. Alex was standing near the edge of the camp when she approached, his back to her. He had his helmet off, as always, and he seemed to be deep in thought, as though he, too, was trying to make sense of the war, everything happening around him. At the sound of her approach, he turned. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. Lyra's heart raced, and she felt a mixture of curiosity and hesitation. "Alex," she said, her voice soft yet commanding, "I need to understand." He raised an eyebrow, his expression unreadable. "Understand what, princess? Why did you walk away that day and not fight back? Why not show me your strength?" she asked, her voice betraying a vulnerability she rarely showed. "You could have proven everything to me. You could have shown me how strong humans really are." Alex took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You already know the answer, don't you?" he said quietly. Strength isn't about proving anything. It's about standing for what you believe in, no matter the cost. It's about making your own choices, even if others don't understand them. I walked away because I didn't need to fight you to prove I was strong. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. His words were simple, yet they struck her with the force of something much greater. She had always thought strength came from power, from control, from domination. But Alex was telling her that strength came from within, from the ability to choose how to respond, how to act in the face of adversity. She took another step closer, her eyes never leaving his. For the first time, she saw him not just as a soldier, but as someone who had a depth she hadn't considered before. You humans, she whispered, more to herself than to him, are different. You have something we don't, Alex smiled, a faint, but genuine smile. Maybe, but we're not so different after all. We both fight for what we believe in. It's just the way we do it that's different. The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken understanding. Neither of them needed to say more. They both knew that the war they were fighting was about more than just victory or defeat. It was about something deeper, something that neither of their species had fully understood before. You're not like the others, Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. I underestimated you, all of you. Alex's expression softened. Maybe you just needed to see things differently. There was a long silence before Lyra finally spoke again, her voice filled with a new resolve. I don't know what happens next, Alex, but I want to know more about you. About your people. Alex nodded, understanding. And I want to know more about you, about your people. I think we've both been wrong about each other. For a moment, they stood there, two leaders from opposing sides, sharing a quiet moment of mutual respect. The war continued in the distance, but neither of them paid it any mind. In that instant, they both knew that something had changed between them, something far greater than the battlefield they stood on. Lyra looked at Alex one last time, a new understanding in her eyes. Perhaps this war doesn't have to end in destruction after all. Alex smiled, his voice steady. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's time for something else to take its place. As the sounds of the distant battle continued to echo, the two stood together in the silence of a new beginning, unsure of what the future held, but ready to face it together. The war was no longer just a matter of strategy. It had evolved into something much deeper. Princess Lyra, the once confident leader of a mighty alien empire, found herself caught in a whirlwind of doubt. What was once certain the superiority of her people now seemed questionable. Alex, the human soldier who had walked away from her mockery, changed everything. Lyra stood on the balcony of her ship, staring at the battlefield below. Her forces were still engaged in battle, but something had shifted in her. The soldiers she once saw as weak, the humans she had always considered beneath her, now seemed to possess something she could not ignore. Resolve. It was a quiet strength that was starting to spread throughout the human ranks, a force that no one, not even the mightiest empire, could ignore. Alex's words echoed in her mind. Strength isn't about proving anything. It's about standing for what you believe in. She had never heard such a simple truth before. The way he had walked away, with no need to prove himself to her, had made her question everything she had known about power. In that moment, she realized that Alex was not just a soldier, he was a symbol of the strength of humanity. She could feel the weight of the decisions ahead pressing down on her. Her people expected her to lead them to victory, to crush the human resistance. But what if the humans weren't the enemies she had been taught to see them as? What if they were capable of more than just survival? Lyra was shaken. She had always relied on her position, her power, and her armies. But now it felt like she was standing at a crossroads, uncertain of which path to take. Her past pride seemed meaningless in the face of what she had discovered. Meanwhile, Alex and his fellow soldiers were deep in strategy discussions. Though Alex's actions had started a shift in Lyra's thinking, he was focused on the immediate task, ending the war. The humans were fighting hard, pushing forward with everything they had. They no longer saw themselves as defeated. They were fighting for their future, and had something to protect, something that gave them strength beyond just their weapons. In their makeshift command tent, Alex and his team pored over maps and intelligence reports, planning their next move.
Yes.
As the lead strategist, Alex had earned the trust of his comrades, not through military rank, but through his actions. His calm, decisive nature had become a source of strength for them. Alex, we've received word that the princess has ordered a temporary ceasefire. It's strange she's not even asking for our surrender. One of his lieutenants, John, said, looking up from his datapad. Alex raised an eyebrow. A ceasefire? What's going on? John shrugged. It's odd. She could crush us right now if she wanted to. It seems like she's reconsidering something. Alex frowned. This is no time for doubt. We have to stay focused. If Lyra wants peace, we need to find out why. We can't just sit back and wait for a gift from the enemy. As the human forces regrouped, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this war was about more than just territory or control. What's about? Understanding, about breaking down the walls of pride and fear that separated the two sides. Alex had learned that the alien princess, despite her power, was not infallible. She was questioning, changing. And that meant there was a chance, however, small, for peace. On the alien side, Lyra's thoughts were consumed with Alex and his people. Her advisors and generals continued to urge her to act swiftly and decisively to finish the war before the humans could regroup. But Lyra's mind was elsewhere. She had seen the humans' true strength, and it had changed her view of them forever. They were not the weak, primitive creatures she had thought them to be. Their resolve, their unwillingness to submit, was something she had never expected. In their quiet defiance, they had shown her a new kind of power, one that couldn't be crushed by weapons or armies. Lyra sat in her quarters, staring at a small holographic map of the galaxy. She traced the path of her empire's expansion, the countless worlds they had conquered, but now it seemed so meaningless. What was the point of victory if it left her feeling empty inside? She had led her people to greatness, but at what cost? Was there more to life than power? A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Your Highness, there is a human delegation requesting to speak with you, Lyra. Her aide announced. Lyra looked up, surprised. A human delegation? What do you... They want, Lyra hesitated. They are asking for a meeting. They say it's time for a new approach. Lyra stood slowly, her mind still racing. Could this be the opportunity she had been waiting for? Was this the moment to finally break the cycle of war and destruction? With a deep breath, she nodded. Send them in. Moments later, Alex and his team walked into her chambers. There was no fanfare, no grand gestures, just two sides meeting on neutral ground. The tension between them was palpable, but it wasn't the same as before. There was a new air of understanding, of possibility. Neither side knew exactly where this conversation would lead, but they both knew it was a step toward something new. Alex spoke first, his voice calm and steady. Princess Lyra, we've fought long enough. We're tired of war, of losing our people. You've shown us strength, but there's another way, one that doesn't involve more bloodshed. We're not your enemies. We're willing to work with you, if you'll let us. Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She had seen this human soldier in battle, had mocked him and underestimated him. But now, she saw him differently. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a representative of something far larger, humanity's resilience, its refusal to be broken. Never imagined humans would speak like this, she said softly. You've shown me a strength I didn't understand. Alex nodded. And you've shown us a power we've never seen before. But we don't want to fight anymore. I believe there's a way forward for both of us, if we're willing to put our pride aside. Lyra's gaze softened. She had always seen herself as a leader, a warrior, but now, for the first time, she wondered if true strength was found in compromise. In understanding, not in conflict. The silence between them grew as Lyra considered his words. She had spent her life fighting for her people, for her empire. But at that moment, she realized that the battle they were fighting wasn't just on the battlefield. It was in their hearts and minds. She had the power to change everything. Right, she said quietly. It's time for something else. I'm willing to listen, to find a way forward. The weight of her words hung in the air. For the first time, Lyra and Alex saw each other not as enemies, but as potential allies, as two people searching for a path to peace. The day was quiet, unlike the chaotic sounds of battle that had filled the air for so long. The distant hum of energy shields and the sound of weapons being fired were replaced by an uneasy stillness as both sides waited for the meeting that would determine the fate of the war. The ceasefire, which had once seemed like an unexpected pause, now felt like the beginning of something far more important. The human forces and the alien army led by Princess Lyra were on the verge of making a decision that could change everything. Alex stood at the edge of the human camp, his eyes scanning the horizon. The battle had been long and hard, but now he found himself focused on a different kind of fight, one that wasn't about weapons or tactics, but about trust. He had been through countless wars, but this was the first time he truly felt the weight of the choices they were about to make. Captain Lyle walked up to him, his expression serious. "Alex, do you really think this is the right move? What if this ceasefire is just a trick? What if Lyra is planning to strike when we least expect it?" Alex turned to face his captain, his face set in determination. Da. I don't know if this is the right move, Lyle. But I know that continuing this fight isn't the answer. We can't keep killing each other. If there's even a chance that we can stop this, we have to take it. Lyle looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "I trust you, Alex. If you think this is the way forward, then we'll follow." Alex gave him a small, appreciative smile. "Thanks, Captain." Inside the alien flagship, Lyra stood with her own generals, staring at the same horizon. The decision she was about to make would define the future of her people, and she could feel the pressure weighing heavily on her shoulders. She had spent her life leading her forces, pushing them to conquer and dominate. But now, for the first time, she wondered if there was another way. Princess, one of her generals, Orcs, spoke up, his voice full of concern. "The humans are weak. We've already won. Why are we hesitating? They are nothing compared to our power." Lyra turned to him, her gaze colder than usual. "It's not about power, Orcs. It's about something more. I've seen their strength. It's not in their weapons or their numbers. It's in their will to survive, to fight for something bigger than themselves. I can't ignore that." Orcs seemed taken aback. "But Princess, you can't be serious. The humans don't stand a chance against us. We've already crushed them." Lyra's voice was firm as she spoke. "No, Orcs, it's you who doesn't understand. They may have fewer resources, but they have something we don't. The strength of their hearts. I've seen it in their eyes. I've seen it in Alex." The name caught the attention of her officers. "Alex," Orcs repeated. "The human soldier? You've spoken to him?" Lyra nodded slowly. "Yes. He's not like the others. He didn't fight with anger or fear. Fought with something deeper, something I didn't expect. He walked away from me without even trying to prove himself. And that's what makes him different." "What if we're wrong about them?" Her generals exchanged nervous glances. Princess Orcs started, his tone softening. "This is not like you. You're a leader who has always acted with strength and certainty. You've built an empire on the belief that we are superior. If you change course now, everything we've worked for could fall apart." Lyra turned away from him, her back straight as she faced the open window. "Sometimes strength isn't about winning battles, Orcs. It's about knowing when to stop fighting. I have to believe there's another way. There has to be." After a long moment of silence, Lyra's mind was made up. She would meet with Alex once again. She would take the risk. Not because she was sure of what would happen next, but because she couldn't ignore the possibility that peace was possible. The war had taken too much from both sides. It was time to find another path. Back at the human camp, Alex and his team were preparing for the meeting. They had no idea what Lyra would say or do, but they had come this far. Alex could feel the weight of their actions on his shoulders. This meeting could be their last chance to end the war. If things went wrong, there could be no turning back. But if it succeeded, it could change the future for both their people. The human soldiers gathered in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. Alex, however, stood alone, staring into the distance. His mind was focused on the task at hand, but his thoughts kept returning to the princess. He had once seen her as nothing more than the enemy, a leader of an alien army bent on destruction. But now, after everything that had happened, he wasn't so sure. There was something about her that made him believe she might be willing to make a change. She wasn't like the others. As the human and alien leaders prepared for the meeting, there was a sense of quiet anticipation in the air. No one knew exactly what to expect, but everyone knew that the outcome would be significant. For the first time in the war, there was a chance for something more than just victory. There was a chance for understanding, for reconciliation. When Lyra's shuttle landed near the human camp, Alex walked forward to meet her, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what would happen next, but he knew that this moment was the turning point. Lyra stepped out of the shuttle, her eyes meeting his. She had come alone, a bold move that shocked everyone around her. The two of them stood there for a moment, not speaking, simply looking at each other. It was clear to both of them that everything they had fought for, everything they had believed, was about to change. Alex took a deep breath, his voice steady as he spoke. "Princess Lyra, I don't know what you've decided, but I believe we can end this. We can stop the fighting, and we can find a way forward, but only if you're willing to try." Lyra's gaze softened. "I've been thinking a lot, Alex, about you, about your people, about everything that's happened, and I think you're right. It's time for something else." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time in the entire war, both sides felt the weight of what they were about to do. The battle was far from over, but this moment was a beginning. It was a step toward a new kind of strength, one based not on power or domination, but on the courage to choose peace.